I want to pick up where he left off, and I want to point out one important central fallacy of the argument of the gentleman from the other side. They keep talking in terms of what we can do, what our government can do. This is the idea of a conscious intervention into a very vast global market process. The vast global market process, if you want to think about it in a metaphor, think about it as a big weather system that's moving across North America. You can see it on the Weather Channel. You know, these huge high-pressure zones that cover 8 states and last for a week, dump huge amounts of snow in the Midwest and so forth. How could any person, even a government, try to do anything about such a massive natural force? The market process is precisely that kind of natural force. Economists want to study what is it that makes the process work. What is it that influences different things? Just as meteorologists try to study the interaction between high pressure zones, low pressure zones, humidities, moistures, and so forth. One thing we know is that we can set the stage by setting incentives. For example, the incentive that attracted all of that Asian capital into the developed economies during the first part of this century. And the money went into our own overbuilding, overinvestment in real estate. Real estate represents about a third of the overinvestment, but also every other asset was also bid up by this huge influx of funds. In some ways, you know, the classical economists used to talk about inflation as being when the government printed too much money, much more money than the economy really wanted. And you could appreciate that a situation like that, if the government is printing too much money, it's going to bid up prices of everything else. What we saw happening in the past 10 years was not so much our government printing money, but the money was coming in from other parts of the world, the lesser developed countries, the countries with very, very high savings rates. China has a savings rate of greater than 50%. Greater than 50%. It's incredible how much money they have earned, and they just keep it. Now, but they don't keep it in their shoebox. They turn around and buy United States government bonds, dollar-denominated bonds. They buy real estate. They buy other assets. And that's what bid up the stock market. That's what bid up the asset prices throughout the Western world. Now that the bubble has burst, you have the exact opposite panicked effect. People are trying to dump these assets. They call them toxic assets. It's regrettable that so many large American financial institutions got onto this train and began to buy the assets also, the greater fool theory. Oh yes, I know I'm paying too much for this asset, but there'll be a greater fool coming down the road next week who'll buy it from me at a higher price. Well, that's how bubbles are built up, and that's how bubbles burst. I want to suggest to you that there is absolutely nothing our government can possibly do to change this process, except perhaps make it worse. As Tom Jenney pointed out, our government can prolong this crisis, or the crisis can be short, sweet, and recovery. I shouldn't say sweet, it'll be painful, but it could be short. Or it could be prolonged into a decade or longer. And I submit that's what Mr. Obama and the Congress is now starting to do, is to prolong the problem. Now, look at the huge, massive, the $800 billion bailout. The main thing you would need to notice there is 3,000 earmarks, pork barrel, politically influenced spending. What good is that going to do the rest of us? What we have is the politicization of our economy in a way that is going to come back to really destroy our country in the long run. Everything will become political. You want a bank loan? Get your congressman to write you a letter. Do you want to invest in a new company? Get some regulatory bureaucrat to give you permission. We're going to start turning this country into a country in which everything is political. You have to have the right friends to get something done. You have to bribe somebody to get something done. The United States government economy is now moving in the direction of Argentina. This is what I want to warn you about. I think it's totally foolish. I think it's terribly dangerous, and it won't even speed up the recovery. It will simply prolong it. I think that this is the direction that the United States went in the 1930s. Franklin Roosevelt discovered that if he put lots of public works, for example, into a particular state or region, he could elect Democrats to Congress. The state of Maine is a great example. In 1934, Roosevelt discovered that if he put a lot of public works people into Maine and built a nice highway that the governor of Maine, the Democrat governor of Maine, could take credit for, they could elect more Democrats. And they did. And so then he began to expand the New Deal programs into other states for political advantage to the Democratic Party throughout the 1930s and 40s. I don't think we want to see America go down that road where politicians basically are taking your money or newly printed money and directing it to where they want it to go for political purposes. I don't think that's a wise thing to do. I am a person that thinks that millions of individuals making decentralized decisions about investments is the best way to make sure that every investment that is made is an investment that is intended to be a profitable investment, not a political investment.